Right, okay, let's go through the mark scheme and have a look at the marks for the formal assessment. So this is the main overall one. First of all, this question, with reference to the item above, so immediately know its application. So straight away, 6 marks, you know that a number of them is going to be for application. Explain what is meant by determinism, and it asks you to refer to 3 types of determinism in your answer. Well, straight away that tells me 3 definitions of determinism: definition, application, definition, application, okay? So that's how you want to think about it, which most of you did, but really that logical structuring, it makes life so much easier for you and so much easier for the examiner as well, and that's the most important thing, because the easier the life for the examiner, the more likely they are to give you the marks that you need, because they're easy to find. Determinism is a view that our behaviour is governed by internal and external forces. Almost all of you exclusively stopped at internal and external forces, whereas in fact determinism is the view that our behaviour is governed by internal and external forces. If we just said that, we're actually talking about the nature-nurture approach, aren't we? Internal or external, is it biological or is it environmental? When actually determinism is the focus on over which we have no control. So the most important bit, if you didn't include that, I might have been generous with you, but actually ultimately if you have a read back through all of your definitions, if each one of your definitions does not refer to having no control, then you're talking about nature and nurture. Remember that activity I did where I made you talk about Stephen Mobley from the point of view of the nature-nurture debate, and then of the environmental and free will debate. And I did say people regularly get these confused. So the key thing about the debate, a lot of the debates are similar, it's the language you use that's different. So you must make reference to no control. So pause here, read through all of your definitions and add in, if you haven't got it, that we have no control over. And that is related to all of your definitions. Most of you didn't do that. It was more, sound like you were more talking about the nature-nurture debate. So we've got biological determinism. Behaviour is controlled by aspects of biology, of which we have no control over. And depression runs in families. So people who didn't get the full marks, you either didn't know generally the key things that stopped you. You didn't mention no control. You lacked that really clear definition application structure, or you didn't apply at all. So, and what I would say is that, like there, put it in quote marks. The examiner's an idiot, just put it in quote marks to really show them that you are taking it from the stimulus. I like that you are trying to extend your knowledge and apply knowledge from other places, but unfortunately, which is probably a stronger skill, but unfortunately they don't want that. They want you to just apply it. Environmental determinism, behaviour is controlled by external influences. So a lot of you here said environmental determinism, behaviour is controlled by the environment. That's something tautological. That means it just goes round in a circle. You're explaining something by using the term in the definition. So you're if you're defining environmental determinism, you don't want to use the word determined and you don't want to use the word environment without further explanation. So make sure if you talked about environmental determinism that you put external influences over it. And then serious social problems, or some of you mentioned serious trauma. Now the reason that's not on the mark scheme in this order you'll see in a minute, but I gave you serious trauma as well because it is an external environment. And then psychic determinism, behaviour is controlled by unconscious fears, unresolved conflict and desires. Okay, and that's psychic determinism from the psychodynamic approach. And that's the example where experience traumatic events. You could also have got marks for soft and hard determinism. I don't think hard determinism would have been a difficult one because biological, environmental and psychic determinism are types of hard determinism, so finding a difference application would have been tricky. However, a lot of you quite rightly did soft determinism, which suggests that our behaviour is governed by internal and external forces, but we do have some control over that, or some free will, and acknowledges some free will. For example, it's about let me have a look at there. However, many people find ways to cope. What we need is the will to overcome our problems. Either of those would have worked well as well. Okay. Question 2b, you were absolutely fine with. Absolutely everybody, almost, I think, got question one correct with the multiple choice. That was brilliant. With reference to the item above, identify one influence of nature on our behaviour and one influence of nurture. That was 2 marks. The key mistake, that if anyone made a mistake, the reason they made a mistake is because they didn't say keep it simple. It's a 2 marker and people wrote 3, 4, 5 sentences. It's 2 marks, 2 sentences. So you just go 1 mark, nature is indicated by the reference to genetic inheritance running in families. 1 mark, nature is indicated by the environment, such as serious social problems or traumatic event in the past. Done. That is it. So 2 marks, keep it simple. Bearing in mind when talking about reductionism, keep it simple, stupid. No offence. Right, question 3. Hundreds of you skipped over this. I was thrilled. If you attempted it and you didn't get the marks, I was just pleased that you attempted that. If you don't try and answer, you will definitely not get any marks. If you have a random guess, then you're possibly going to get some marks. You don't lose any marks. The examiner doesn't see your entire paper. They just see every question separately. So they would mark question 3, they would mark 250 question 3s, and then they would go back onto question 4 and mark 250. So they don't see every single one. So it doesn't taint their view of the following bits of your paper. It doesn't matter at all, but you need to attempt it, okay? So it's absolutely vital that you do. First question, what level of measurement is being used in this study? The levels of measurement, nominal, ordinal and interval. Okay, so that is levels of measurement. They use the term in the exam. I've emphasised it a few times in class as well. Levels of measurement. So nominal, ordinal and interval. The answer on the mark scheme was nominal, and I gave you marks for that because it's correct. We're placing them into categories. However, a few people said ordinal, and I would support that as well. This is a specimen paper, so it didn't go through the same rigorous checking as other papers did. So in the checking process, it would have brought up that that it could be nominal or ordinal. The reason it's nominal, you're placing them in categories. However, technically, the reason it's actually ordinal, I would suggest, is because you're placing them on a scale from very antisocial, mildly antisocial to not antisocial. That is a ranking process, I would say. And then explain one limitation of the levels of measurement you've identified in your answer. Now, this isn't something that we've done. I think it's unlikely to come up in the real exam, but I wanted to see how you all thought about this. Almost everybody who attempted it, I was really thrilled, A, that you attempted it, and B, you did manage to get some marks alongside it. And I particularly liked that lots of people were applying as well, which was brilliant. So you get 1 mark for saying a weakness of categorical or nominal data is that it's crude, unsophisticated, or does not enable very sensitive analysis. This is a weakness because it does not yield a numeric result for each participant. So it's just placing them in a category. So if you said that was nominal, that was the case. A lot of you argued with ordinal that the scale itself was subjective, and I would agree with that, and that's what I would support. The idea that one person's view of what's very antisocial and mildly antisocial, the difference between them is subjective, and therefore it reduces the validity of the measure, because we can't be confident that it could be replicated or that it's not based on an objective measurement as well. Okay. Discuss the nature-nurture debate. So if you went for nature-nurture, refer to at least 2 topics you have studied in your answer. Regardless of whether you did nature-nurture or holism and reductionism, you got your 6 marks for your AO1, and you need to remember it's only 6 marks, so most people wrote too much AO1. What I would rather see is a smaller amount of AO1 in lots and lots of detail than a large amount of AO1 where you cover all of the definitions, but you do so very briefly. So with reductionism versus holism, potentially, I'd have expected you to define reductionism, define holism, and then either talked about biological and environmental reductionism in lots of detail, or talked about the levels of explanation in lots of detail. Not both. And same with nature versus nurture, it's a little bit easier. I found less issues. The issue I found more with nature versus nurture debate is people not knowing about the twin studies, but we'll come back to that as well. So on the specimen, on the spec paper, the spec itself, not paper, there is a list of terms. So say holism and reductionism, levels of explanation, environmental reductionism, biological reductionism. So then you need to know the term holism, the term reductionism, the term environmental reductionism, the term biological reductionism, and the 3 levels of explanation. You must know those, because you could be asked a question, 4 marks, define the levels of explanation. Yeah, I got interrupted, and now I can't remember where I finished off. Sorry, I try and make a note of it, but I completely forgot. So I know that I was banging on about AO1 and the importance of... So you could get asked a question, 4 marks, define or explain the levels of explanation of reductionism, for example, and you'd have to know the terms, so that's why I teach it. And I do go through all the terms, say if we do essay plans or something like that, it's less of an essay plan and possibly more of a list of everything that you need to know, okay? However, you can be selective and you can talk about less. You don't need to talk about all of the terms. I have to teach you them all in case they come up specifically, they could be named. However, you don't have to talk about all of the terms. The way I'd want to see your AO1 structured is definition, example, and then linking the definition and the example together. So, for example, biological reductionism is the idea of reducing complex human behaviours down into its simplest biological elements. For example, OCD.